The most interesting magic in fantasy isn't the kind that gives you power. It's the kind that takes something from you every time you use it. Your blood, your memories, your humanity. Because the darkest magic systems in fantasy all follow one rule. Power always comes with a cost. Across fantasy stories, magic is rarely free. The most compelling worlds don't treat magic like a superpower. They treat it like a dangerous bargain. In this video, we're exploring the darkest magic systems ever imagined. The kinds of magic that corrupt the user, demand sacrifice, and slowly destroy the people who wield them. A magic system becomes dark when power demands something deeply personal. Not just effort, but loss. Sometimes it costs blood. Sometimes it consumes memories. Sometimes it twists the mind until the user becomes something unrecognizable. The darker the magic, the more it forces the user to ask a terrifying question. How much of yourself are you willing to lose for power? And across fantasy stories, that cost usually appears in 5 different forms. Blood magic is one of the oldest and most unsettling forms of magic in fantasy, because blood represents life itself. In these systems, power comes directly from sacrifice. The greater the spell, the greater the blood that must be given. Sometimes the user sacrifices their own body. Sometimes they sacrifice someone else. And every time the spell is cast, it reminds the audience of one brutal truth. Power built on blood will always demand more blood. If blood magic spends life, soul magic spends eternity. In some fantasy worlds, spells are fueled by capturing or destroying souls. A mage might trap a soul inside a weapon, consume it for power, or bind it into a spell that can never be undone. But every time this happens, something irreversible occurs. A soul disappears forever, and the magic user becomes the kind of person who is willing to make that trade. Some of the darkest magic systems aren't powered by sacrifice. They're powered by knowledge that was never meant to be understood. Ancient languages, lost spells, secrets buried for thousands of years. But forbidden knowledge carries a hidden danger, because the more a mage learns, the more the magic begins to change them. Their mind fractures, their morality fades, and eventually they become something closer to the magic they study than the person they once were. Another terrifying form of dark magic is curse magic. Instead of creating power, curse magic spreads suffering. A single spell might bring disease, misfortune, madness, or endless pain. But curses have a strange property in many fantasy worlds. They rarely disappear. They linger, sometimes for generations, turning a single act of magic into a legacy of suffering. Some of the darkest magic systems are fueled by pain itself. The user becomes stronger the more they endure. Every wound increases their power. Every moment of suffering deepens the magic within them. But there's a disturbing consequence. Because when pain becomes power, the user begins to seek it. And eventually, the line between strength and self-destruction disappears entirely. So why do these magic systems appear so often in fantasy? Because dark magic externalizes something very human: temptation. Everyone wants power. But the question that dark magic asks is far more interesting. Not can you gain power, but what would you sacrifice to obtain it? Would you give up your blood, your soul, your humanity? Or would you refuse the power entirely? That tension is what makes dark magic systems so memorable, because the real battle isn't against enemies, it's against the corruption inside the user. The greatest magic systems in fantasy aren't defined by how powerful they are. They're defined by how much they change the person using them. Because when magic has no cost, it's just a tool. But when magic demands sacrifice, it becomes a story. So here's the question. Would you rather have limitless power with a terrible cost, or no magic at all? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy exploring the darker side of fantasy worlds, subscribe to the Lore Crucible, where the stories of fantasy are forged.